Rejoice, my fellow Gehennas, as 2024 is for real no cap on God, the year of the Gehenna, cause Dress Akko's and Makoto's limited banners are finally arriving this week alongside Iroha's rerun banner in the new Gehenna party event as part of the 3.5 anniversary celebration, with Ibuki being the event's welfare student. For those of you who don't know, we will also be receiving 100 free pulls from 23rd to 30th July, which you can only use on either one of these three banners, kinda like the Swimsuit Uwi and Swimsuit Hinata's banners. And they will not carry over to the Dress Hina and Swimsuit Hoshino banners. So remember to use them and choose wisely on which banner to use them on. Also, I sadly won't be doing Iroha due to how long this video already is. And no, I couldn't separate them into two videos this time because of time issues and certain explanations I wanted to talk about. So yeah, I apologize, trust me, I'm as gutted as y'all, but if she returns anytime soon, I will make sure to do one on her because I really want to talk about Iroha since she is one of my faves. Anyways, without further ado, here is a short review on Dress Akko, Makoto, and Ibuki. Let's start off with our pet dog, the tsundere who hates us but is probably secretly the freakiest. It's my wife Kayoko's #1 enemy and the biggest Hina glazer, Dress Akko. She looks absolutely smoking hot in that dress. The curves on her hips, that boob window in the front, her beautiful blue hair and eyes, and of course, her iconic side boob, all complement her dress very well, and I'm a huge fan of her new design, especially once I saw her spicy L2D. Even her chibi model looks really hot, like god damn, the devs really cooked. She is a limited explosive striker supporter with blue armor who is terrible in urban terrains, excellent in field, and average indoors. She also uses this equipment set with the boots and watch boosting her personal damage and the pin increasing her survivability. Let's talk about her skills. Dress Akko has a 5-cost EX skill which allows her to increase her allies' crit and crit damage in a round-shaped area for 30 seconds, while accumulating 1 security success stack for each ally that she buffs, and she can hold a max of 15. Her basic skill deals damage to one enemy every 35 seconds, while decreasing their defense for 22 seconds. And the skill's damage increases based on the number of security success stacks she currently holds. Her enhanced skill increases her max HP, and her sub-skill increases her attack by a certain amount for each accumulated SS stack. At UE40, she gains more attack on her enhanced skill plus, and at UE50, her field combat power improves from S to SS. Dress Akko is quite similar to her regular version as they are both outdogs, but more importantly, she too is a crit and crit damage buffer, though there are stark differences. First, Dress Akko is a striker instead of a special unit, and also her buffs are now AoE as opposed to normal Akko's single target buffs. Focusing on Dress Akko, she is a good AoE crit and crit damage buffer, with her buff values being pretty high as she is able to increase your allies' crit and crit damage by 19.8% and 57.5% respectively at max level EX. Her buffs definitely aren't as potent as regular Akko's or other dedicated single target buffers, but they are still quite good, and hers has the advantage of being AoE, which is why her numbers are lower. Not only that, her EX's range is pretty wide, plus the buffs last for quite a while at 30 seconds, though it has a hefty 5 cost. Since she is an AoE buffer, she is more effective in teams with multiple DPS units, as her EX can immediately buff them with one application, as opposed to using a single target buffer who will take a longer time and more cost to buff these DPS students. Moreover, while you can technically use her in a team with a single hyper carry, in my opinion, that would be a waste since you'd be using up 5 costs to buff only one unit, which is why you'd be better off using single target buffers instead for these 1 DPS unit teams. Other than that, being a striker supporter, using her frees up a spot in your special slot for you to fill with another DPS, healer, or etc. However, the downside to this is that she can die, and if she does, you lose her buffing abilities. Thus, you probably wouldn't want to bring her into certain content, especially those with enemies that have blue attack. Aside from those, Dress Akko is also a defense down debuffer as demonstrated by her basic skill, making her useful against bosses with high defense. She is able to decrease the enemy's defense by 24% at max level basic skill, which is kinda decent. It's about almost the same amount as Azusa's basic skill, and it has a nice duration of 22 seconds. It can also deal pretty good damage even without max security success stacks, but it becomes much stronger when you have 12 or more stacks. Though again, it can take a while to accumulate them, especially since her EX is expensive and if you aren't doing Fury Offset. Finally, while her personal damage does increase quite a bit the more SS stacks she has, receiving a 85.5% attack boost at max level sub and 15 SS stacks. However, it isn't as important since her main role in the team is to buff your students and occasionally shred the enemy's defense, not dealing damage. As a crit and crit damage buffer, Dress Akko is flexible enough to be used in a bunch of different raids, except for those with bosses that have Mystic Attack on Insane and Torment, as they can deal 2 times damage against her blue armor. In the content that she is viable in, her main role would be to increase your striker unit's crit and crit damage with her AoE EX, subsequently improving their damage output. And like I mentioned, she is much more useful in a multi-DPS team. Not only that, her ability to apply a defense debuff with her basic skill also makes her a good option against bosses with high defense like Bina. Or for instance, she actually sees quite a bit of use against Hyro, as her basic skill can shred his exorbitant defense, and it can kind of act as a replacement for Azusa's basic skill. However, against him, even on Torment, those who bring her usually use her in a 1 DPS team consisting of Dress Hina and not multiple DPS students, which is contradictory to what I previously stated, but considering it is Dress Hina, well, I think you can understand, and Akko's buffs can greatly improve her already high damage. Thus, for your Dress Hina Hyro team, especially for Torment or Insane, you can either use Dress Akko and have another unit like Nagisa or Swimsuit Shiroko in your special slot, or use Azusa instead while having normal Akko as your crit buffer. In other raids, Dress Akko is mostly used in one of your Torment teams, since multi-DPS teams are typically reserved for Torment difficulty, while a lot of Insane teams would rely solely on one hyper carry, though you can still use her on Insane or lower. With all that being said, Dress Akko primarily sees a lot of use in Fury Offset, where she is amazing in due to a number of reasons. First of all, her AoE buffs are way more effective, since in this mode, you need to use multiple DPS units in your team, preferably AA damage dealers. And with Dress Akko, she can buff all your AA DPS units crit and crit damage with 1 EX, massively boosting your entire team's damage output. While single target buffers like Akko are still viable, in my opinion, for this mode, it's honestly much faster and valuable to employ EX skills that can buff your whole team in one use, even though the buffs aren't as strong, cause single target buffs will take longer, require more rotations, and could potentially be harder to pull off. Not only that, her expensive 5 cost is nothing in this mode, since your cost meter will recover very quickly, and you will also be able to increase her SS stacks at a much faster rate since there will be 6 strikers including her in your team instead of 4, so you'd only need to use her EX twice to gather 12 stacks to have her BS deal its maximum damage. Finally, Dress Akko also takes less damage from set starting from floor 50 onwards, as he has explosive attack type, meaning he will inflict 0.5 times damage against her blue armor. Thus, all these make Dress Akko an essential unit for Fury Offset, regardless of the floor number and armor type, as she will make your runs much easier in this content by increasing your team's damage output. Overall, Dress Akko is a crit and crit damage buffer, and a defense debuffer hybrid. as she takes on 2 roles at once, and she is a great buffer for teams that contain more than one damage dealer. Hence, I personally feel you should pull for her, mainly because she is a limited unit, and since she is a vital unit for Fury Offset. You may also pull for her if you don't have any dedicated crit buffers like Akko and Yuya Fuka, so you can rely on her first even if you're using a team with a single DPS student. However, should you prioritize using your 100 pulls on her or Makoto? Well, it depends, because they are both good limited units with very different roles in very different content. So it depends entirely on who you want/need the most, which is why I can't exactly pinpoint who you should focus on between the two of them, and it's honestly up to you. But A, if you very much prefer Makoto instead, or B, if you've used up all your 100 pulls but the RNG gods have spat in your face by not letting her come home and you don't have any more pyroxenes to continue pulling/you're saving for Dress Hina, then you may skip Dress Akko. Though again, it's definitely worth pulling her if you're an Akko fan because of 3 reasons. 1. Her cute cafe interaction with Dress Hina. 2. This spicy L2D where I assume you're helping her zip up her dress. And 3. Her adorable end of battle interaction with Dress Hina. Now we move on from the Prefect team to the Pandemonium Society, starting with its president, Makoto. To be honest, I don't really know too much about Makoto other than the fact that she's Hina's biggest hater, like Kendrick vs Drake levels of hatred. And I won't be surprised to see diss tracks between both of them in the future. Maybe Hina as K-Dot and Makoto as Drizzy, you know? Certified lover boy, certified pedophile. Wop 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 wop, I go fuck 'em up. Wop 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 wop, I'ma do my stuff. Why you trolling like a bitch, ain't you tired? Tryna bomb Gehenna, but I got me a sensei. They're not like us, they're not like us, they're not like us. Okay, the lyrics I made aren't as smooth as Kendrick's, but hey, I'm not a rapper. Also, I can't lie, I'm not a huge fan of Makoto herself. I don't hate her, I just don't really vibe with her design. No, her dress version gives me the urge to bark, or her personality. But she loves Ibuki to death and has a cat, so that's enough for me. She is a limited piercing special dealer who has D combat power in urban terrains, B in field, and S indoors. She also rocks this equipment set with the gloves and watch being the priority since it boosts her offensive capabilities. Let's have a look at her skills. With Makoto's 6 cost EX, she deals damage to enemies in a large circular area while giving herself an afro, with the damage increasing depending on the number of enemies within her EX's range. Her basic skill, which activates every 55 seconds, decreases the enemy's defense in a round-shaped area for 35 seconds. Her enhanced skill increases her attack, and her sub-skill boosts all allies' piercing effectiveness. She gains additional attack on her enhanced skill plus at UE 40, and her indoor combat power converts from S to SS at UE 50. As you can tell, Makoto is primarily a yellow AoE damage dealer, and she's a very strong one at that, due to her powerful EX skill, which essentially works like this. The more enemies there are, the harder her EX hits. Specifically, there needs to be minimum 10 or more enemies for her EX skill to deal the maximum damage. And this is very important because the damage she deals greatly increases. At max level EX, if there are 4 or fewer enemies, her multiplier is only around 296%, but with 5 to 9 enemies, it jumps up to 592%. But with 10 or more enemies, her multiplier leaps up as high as 987%, which is a lot for an AoE attack. Not to mention, her EX's range is extremely huge, to the point where it's probably the largest in the game. However, once again, her EX comes with 2 downsides. It is quite costly at 6 costs, and the animation can take slightly long. Thus, all these make Makoto useful in content with tons, and I mean tons, of yellow mobs, since her EX will destroy them, cause again, more enemies, more Makoto stonks. On the flip side, she isn't good for content that only have a few mobs, cause not only will her damage be lower, but due to her EX skill being expensive and having a slightly lengthy animation time, it's not worth using her just to take out like 4 enemies, and you'd be wasting your time and cost. Also, ideally, these enemies should have a lot of health, cause if not, again, I personally think you'll be using up a lot of time and cost just to get rid of enemies that will go down easily. And it's honestly overkill, and at that point, it makes much more sense to just use other AoE units who have lower cost instead, cause it'd be much faster. I hope that makes sense. Other than that, her sub-skill is also very good, as she is able to passively increase your entire team's piercing effectiveness, and she's the only unit in the game who has this buff on her sub-skill so far. Hence, this makes her universally useful in any yellow team, as she is able to improve your piercing unit's yellow weakness damage. Lastly, her basic skill is kinda meh. While defense down debuffs are always welcome, her defense shred values are quite low since it is AoE and it takes hella long to proc at 55 seconds. But hey, at least you get this neat reaction from Hina if they are in the same team. As I previously explained, Makoto is mainly useful for content with a lot of yellow mobs that have high HP. This makes her excellent against Cheese and Yellow Armored Greg. For these two raids, she is usually used in your Insane and Torment teams, as she can easily clear out the minions even on these two difficulties since she has a lot of firepower, and her EX's range is big enough to hit most, if not all of them. However, she isn't really utilized in extreme or lower, cause while you definitely can use her in these lower difficulties, especially if you're struggling, maybe cause you're a newer player, I'm not trying to stop you from using her. In my opinion, for veterans, it's kind of overkill, and other yellow AoE units who have lower costs are good enough to get the job done on these easier difficulties, and they might even make your runs faster. But again, that's just how I personally feel. Use her if you want to. For Cheese, she has literally become the hyper carry for phase 1, especially the indoors version, as her EX is able to destroy the minions even on Insane and Torment. She can also be used a little bit in phase 2 to get rid of the mobs that she summons, and while she definitely becomes a nuke at UE 30 and above, I've personally seen players with only 3 to 4 star Makoto still clear the minions easily. Also, while I definitely don't think she can help you one team this raid on Torment, there's no doubt that she will make your runs much more comfier, allowing you to almost breeze through phase 1. The same can be said for Yellow Gregorius, where you would use her EX skill whenever the choir members on the side appear, since by combining them and some of the members right in front of Greg on that particular side, you'd be hitting more than 10 enemies, allowing you to deal massive damage to Greg. Lastly, with her passive piercing effectiveness buff on her sub-skill, it immediately makes her a solid choice for any yellow team just for that buff, since it improves your team's damage output. Overall, Makoto is an extremely strong yellow AoE damage dealer who excels in battles with swarms of yellow mobs that have a lot of health, and she has now become an important unit for Cheese and Yellow Armored Grand Assault Greg, especially for the higher difficulties. Thus, if you want to have smoother runs in these two raids, you may pull for her, especially since she is a limited unit. However, once again, whether you should prioritize her or Dress Akko is up to your needs, since they are both limited and two different types of units. And I can't say for certain who between the two should be your priority. That being said, you may skip her if you're perhaps a new-ish player, cause Makoto isn't exactly suitable for early game content like missions and whatnot, as her EX skill isn't as effective at taking out like 45 mobs in missions where the enemy would easily die, and you'd honestly be better off using other yellow AoE students. But then again, I'd still recommend you try and pull for her even if you are a newer player, cause not only is she limited, but also having her allows you to prepare for endgame Cheese and Greg when you eventually get to that point. Aside from that though, the main reasons to skip her would be if you prefer to go all in for Dress Akko instead, or again, you got unlucky with your 100 free pulls and don't have enough paroxenes to continue pulling, / you're saving your supply for next week when D Hina rolls around. Otherwise though, if you like Makoto cause she's your wifey, which is kinda wild to me cause I thought she was as hated as Chirino, then go ahead and pull for her. Moving on from the Devil of Gehenna to its sweetest angel, it's Ibuki. I think I speak for everyone when I say our daughter is extremely adorable, wholesome, cute, and funny. Plus, I don't think she's capable of even hurting a fly. And if anyone even dares to try and hurt her, pray for them, cause they'd have to face us senseis and the full wrath of the Pandemonium Society. Also, before I move on, some of y'all gotta keep it in your pants first, alright? I know there are those of y'all down bad for her, especially after seeing all the art of her seducing a sensei, since she is a succubus, but let me finish this review real quick, alright? She is a welfare mystic support striker with heavy armor who has the following terrain moves: C in urban, B in field, and A indoors. These are the equipment set she uses, with the necklace improving her self-heal abilities and the pin increasing her survivability. Ibuki's skills are quite unique. Firstly, her 3-cost EX skill increases all allies' attack except for herself in a round-shaped area for 35 seconds. But if she's in the same team as Iroha and you use Iroha's EX, she boards Toramaru, gaining a new 5-cost EX, where she deals massive damage to enemies in a circular area after receiving hit pads from Iroha. When not aboard Iroha's tank, her basic skill deals damage to one enemy every 30 seconds while decreasing their attack for 20 seconds. Her enhanced skill ups her max HP, and with her sub-skill, she restores a percentage of her own health every time she activates her EX. Her enhanced skill plus at UA 40 further provides her with extra HP, and her urban combat power is upgraded from C to A at UA 50. On her lonesome, Ibuki is kind of like the striker version of regular Kotama, as she is a strong AoE attack buffer. With her max level EX skill, she can provide a 50.2% attack increase to your other strikers for the low cost of 3. And this buff also lasts for quite a while at 35 seconds. While her attack buff isn't as potent as those from single target attack buffers like Kamhare, being able to increase your other striker unit's attack by basically half is still really good, since it greatly improves your team's DPS. And similar to Dress Akko, this makes her really useful for multi-DPS teams, where you'd want to buff 2 or more DPS units in one go. However, Ibuki's main appeal is actually her new tactical support link-up mechanic, I don't know what to call it, with Iroha. Again, essentially, if she and Iroha are in the same team, and you use Iroha's EX, Ibuki then automatically climbs aboard Toramaru, which then leads to a couple of things. First, Ibuki will give Toramaru a bunch of bonus stats, but most importantly, she will now have a new, slightly more expensive EX skill with Iroha, allowing her to deal a massive AoE blast which actually inflicts quite a lot of damage at max level EX. And it scales off Toramaru's stats, letting her easily wipe the floor with blue mobs. I should also mention, while Ibuki's EX changes, it does not take away Iroha's own EX skill, nor does it remove Iroha's basic skill or Toramaru's basic skill. It only converts Ibuki's EX. Secondly, whenever Ibuki rides the Panzer, she becomes invulnerable. If Toramaru is attacked, its health is the one that's getting depleted, not Ibuki's. And if the tank goes down or runs out of time, Ibuki will leave the tank and be back on the battlefield on her own, meaning Ibuki will never take damage as long as she's inside Toramaru, allowing you to use her as a bait to tank lethal attacks. Pardon the pun. Thus, basically, Ibuki is an excellent partner for Iroha, as she gains a new EX, which lets her deal tons of damage and become invulnerable when she's in the tank. Aside from that, if Ibuki is on her own, she has a pretty decent basic skill, as she can reduce the enemy's attack by 24.1% at max level BS, while dealing not bad damage. And this debuff can be useful since it gives your team more survivability by making the enemy hit not as hard. Finally, her sub-skill is also quite good, since she recovers some of her health whenever you use her attack buff EX, which also directly improves her survivability. Due to her natural partnership with Iroha, Ibuki mainly sees a lot of use in Perorazilla, where you'd obviously want to pair her with Iroha in order to use her combined EX to deal a lot of AoE damage to Peroros minions and the mini Peroros. Not to mention, she can be used in both the field and indoor versions of this raid. While the Ibuki-Iroha combo is usually utilized in one of your Torment teams, you can actually use them to one team Insane, though this can involve quite a lot of crit molding, so you'd probably need buffers like Akko or Dress Aru to lessen your burden. However, if you don't have Iroha, you can still use Ibuki in this raid as an AoE attack buffer, boosting your team's damage output, though most would just partner her with a senpai as that combo is more effective for this raid. Regardless, for other content, you'd probably use her on her own as she is universally useful as a great attack buffer, especially if you don't have someone like Camp Hare. But you might want to avoid bringing her against enemies that have piercing attack like Shirokuro, Kaiten, and Bina on Insane and Torment, since they will deal 2 times damage against her heavy armor. Overall, Ibuki is an excellent unit despite being a welfare student, and she mainly shines in teams that include Iroha, as she can link up with her to gain a powerful new EX skill, being the first ever and currently the only student to utilize this mechanic. Even if you don't have Iroha, Ibuki is still a strong attack buffer whom you can use in a lot of other content, and she has good buff values and survivability options in her kit. The best part is, she's free, and all you gotta do is play the first story stage of the new event to get her, and you can then farm for her Alefs through the event's new field missions. Speaking of which, farming her to 3 stars is more than enough, but there's certainly nothing wrong with going up to UE50 since the extra HP at UE40 boosts her survivability, and it actually also gives Toramaru more health, and her affinity for urban terrains improves by a lot at UE50, making her more useful in urban content. You can also farm for more of her Alefs if you're just a huge fan of our adorable daughter, and I cannot wait for her to teach me some maths in her L2D cause I stink at it. And that's all for this week's review. All in all, Dress Akko is a good crit and crit damage buffer who has a sprinkle of defense debuff capabilities, while Makoto is a strong yellow AoE damage dealer who is mostly used in high-end content. While I didn't include Iroha into this review, again, sincere apologies for those of you who love her. Believe me, I too am sad cause I'm more of a Iroha poison instead of a Hina antidote kind of guy, and I would have loved to share a lot of Iroha art with y'all. There are tons of reviews out there about her, like these videos from Tomogamudo, RS Rainstorm, or Sherlock Plays, and I highly recommend watching them if you wanna know how good she is. And yes, while the introduction of Ibuki has stirred things up a little bit, in my opinion, it hasn't really changed her too much, and she's mostly the same, except now she's much stronger for Perorazilla. Otherwise, she is still an excellent blue TS unit who will greatly help a lot of players in the early game, and even in certain endgame content, like I said, Perorazilla, as well as PvP. Thus, I would say they are all worth pulling for. However, who you should prioritize your 100 pulls on and who you should skip is kinda hard for me to say cause they're all really good and have different roles. Pulling and skipping each of them have their own pros and cons. While Iroha is an excellent unit, especially for beginners, and with the introduction of Ibuki, her value has significantly increased, she is permanent after all, and there will be double drop rates for 3-star units during Dress Hina's banner, so you could hope to get her then. On the flip side, while Dress Akko and Makoto are really good, they are more catered to veteran players as they aren't exactly beginner friendly, and new players should focus more on next week since it's a great time to get new 3-star students cause again, double drop rate. But then again, they are limited, so who knows when they will return. There are a lot of factors to consider and it's honestly very confusing, so this is one of the rare times I would have to say you guys will have to make your own decisions based on what you want/need, as well as the amount of paroxines you guys have. As for Ibuki, just make sure to claim her and proceed to farm for her elves. She is a great attack buffer on her own, and she's also the best partner for Iroha. Anyways, one last reminder, free 100 pulls given each day for a week. I think they will give like 30 on the last day or something. And while you don't have to immediately use up the pulls there and then, like you can accumulate all 100 to the last day, just to be safe, be sure to log in every day to at least claim the free pulls. And most importantly, the free 100 pulls do not carry over to Dress Ina's and Swimsuit Hoshino's banners, so use them before they expire. That's all from me. Good luck with your pulls. Hina fans, enjoy the event cause y'all get to see our Hinature in all her glory, and I'll see y'all in the next one.